That's 113 votes cancelled in an election that about less than 500,000 people voted. Can we really say that INEC did its job properly? That is even by the admission of the commission itself.
Yes, you see, I have said that there are a lot of blemishes across the board. But you see, you don't also isolate the political parties. Because some of these things, some of these cancellations come up as a result of maybe inadequate education on the part of both INEC and on the part of the political parties. The parties should also be in a position to educate their members and tell them this is the way this should be done. But of course, you do, with the way we do things here, there's a lot of fire service approach to some of the things we do here. And even on the side of INEC, of course, you see the massive assemblage of officers and all that. It gives me the impression that gave them an insight into the kind of challenge that they were going to have. And most unfortunately, some of these fears were not allayed by what actually happened on the ground. But you see, we must also be in a position to isolate that. Because I do not believe that a patient who is suffering from appendicitis should be, taken to the morgue.
We're looking at pockets of protest, across the state. One of the things that comes to the fore is that some of them are not even talking about a candidate. They don't seem to be supporting a particular political party, at least from what we can see. And they're not even saying that our man did not win or our woman did not win. It's about the fact that they said they couldn't vote. Should we take them seriously?
Well, of course, there is no reason why some of these things should not be taken into consideration. But like I have told you, this is a learning process. And I believe that it even offers INEC a broader perspective to look at the issues, because my understanding is that the elections they did in Edo State and some other locations turned out better than what they did in Anambra. So I believe that this is also a clear-cut indication that they should step up, they should move higher.
Is that an excuse for that?
In terms of organization.
You're just looking at that. I mean, from what you said, even from perception alone, I don't know if you monitor the elections in Edo State or in Ondo State, but even from perception, let's go by what we've seen in the papers, or because I'm sure that if you did not monitor the elections physically, whatever impression you have of these elections was what you saw in the papers or saw on television. Now, going by that alone and looking at the size of Anambra State, we have been told that the state can be crisscrossed in 3 hours or even less. Is there an excuse for that?
Well, of course, the state is politically vibrant. And I think Anambra State represents a pressurized can in terms of politics. That is what is playing out now. The agitations, of course, they're very massive. And some of these agitations, of course, they all have political coloration. So you put and you also take into consideration that the party that apparently has chances of winning, or the party that came up top, that are not protesting, they will start protesting when some of these protests when the protests on the ground now start metamorphosing into something that will threaten their chances. So that is why it's not as if they are keeping quiet because they want to keep quiet, because they believe that due process should be followed. I'm a lawyer and I believe in due process. These are issues that they should have adverted their minds to. They had preview of the voters register, and if they fail to take advantage of those things, then I think they have themselves to blame.
Do you think the Anambra State is peculiar? Are there certain peculiarities that makes conducting elections there difficult? I mean, we've seen reruns done in Anambra. It's not the first time, it's not the second time, and one will wonder, why is it so difficult?
Well, I think Anambra has always been a peculiar. I don't think you have there's any other state where you have about 20 or 30 gubernatorial candidates gunning for a particular office. So there are snippets of incidents that will give you an inkling into the mindset of some of these political gladiators. Some of these things, of course, in some other political jurisdictions, you will definitely not get them. But what I'm saying here is that the sustained agitation for cancellation is misplaced. It is misconceived.
In all of that,
you cannot situate that or predicate it on the position of the law. And if they are doing that, but our position is that they should take advantage of the provisions of the Electoral Act and look at it and advise themselves properly.
I think that said, or I think some of them should understand that the Electoral Act doesn't give INEC the powers, knowing full well that they have already announced some results to cancel that particular election. But away from all of that, because you tried to make it look as if what we see in the media truly doesn't exist. So I want to go back to that and perhaps clarify for us. Are you saying the anomalies that we have seen, especially with the electoral umpire saying that, well, one of its own messed up the process, and presently as we speak, is in custody and he's been speaking, didn't that also affect what we have seen? We're talking about the outcome of this particular election.
Yes, you see, the point I'm making is that some of these protests are strictly localized. We have about 21 local governments in Anambra State. Some of these protests, you see, they are localized, and in order to deal with them, you have to surgically address the issue.
Every issue is localized.
Yes,
that's the starting point.
I'm looking at it in terms of spread. In terms of spread, if you put that on the board, with Anambra State, you find out that it is extremely localized. And the point I'm making is that you cannot just extract these complaints in respect of these locations and then blow it out of proportion, because that is what is happening. I'm not speaking for ABGA. I'm not speaking for any political party.
What do you mean by localized? Because, I mean, what we've seen is that most times they want to march to INEC office. At least their INEC headquarters in Oka. How do you mean localized?
No, the point is that there are very, very few local governments where these complaints are coming from. The complaints are not coming from all over the state. So I believe that INEC is in a position to radically address them, because the area in question is not massive. So these are issues that can be addressed through a supplementary electoral process, and I believe that is what is going to happen, because that also captures and reflects the true position of the law.
I have a question here for you from Akinola Rotimi. He says, Mr. Nwankwo, as a crusader for justice advocate, and that's the name of your organization, do you think that the aggrieved parties will get justice at the tribunal?
Well, I'm totally certain that they will. The reason is that even within the electoral law provides that even before the elections, a minimum of 14 days before the election, that the election tribunal should be up and running, and 7 days before the election, that the registry of that tribunal should be open. So I believe that if they are aggrieved, of course they have to fall back on the electoral law and ventilate their claims.
But add to that, I mean, also following that, do you think that justice has been carried out with the way these elections were prosecuted?
Well, you put it on a scale, and then I will say yes if you put it on a scale, because there is no community without Judas, as we used to say, and of course there is no way you conduct an election in Nigeria, anywhere in this country, without losers coming up to make the kind of noise we are saying. It is becoming traditional, because we are bad losers, and that is what is playing out. And I have no apologies for that, because I believe that if you feel aggrieved, there is always an avenue for you to take advantage of the legal system and ventilate your claims. The tribunals are there. They are already up and running, so they should take advantage of the tribunals. And first and foremost, they must allow the elections to be concluded. The reason being that you cannot approach the tribunal without the name of the person you are challenging the result as a party in the matter.
Would that when the supplementary elections hold, when they do hold, do you think these mistakes and all of that will be taken care of?
Well, obviously, I believe that INEC will be up and running.
That they will come on time, and there will be no issue of missing names in the register.
Yes, because even the courts, even the tribunals, whenever they are approached, will also take that into consideration. That if you fail to regularize some of these issues before the supplementary election, that might be some bad news for INEC.
Let's also talk about movement of persons, because, well, specifically the APC, on that day, the news was awash everywhere that some of its key members was somehow imprisoned in their hotel rooms, specifically Malam El-Rufai, and movement of persons on election day, and when you're not a registered voter in a particular election, what does the Electoral Act say about movement on elections day?
Well, you see, the point is that some of these things are being put in check to minimize negative fallout from any election. And of course, you see, some of these individuals are very, very loquacious. There are people that are well known, and they are already identifiable with particular groups. If, for instance, they move into such an environment, I am extremely against the restriction, because even that is the core issue that is captured in the fundamental rights provisions of our constitution. But what I want Nigerians must also look at is the fact that what sentiments will Nigerians express if, for instance, you know that so and so individual is within a community and members of an opposing political party attacks the person. So I believe that some notable people like El-Rufai, when they come into an environment like that, especially given the charged political atmosphere, ought to have sought for some measure of police protection. He is not an individual that will move into an environment and start walking around. Because if anything happens to a person like El-Rufai, the natural interpretation would be that this thing came from the opposition. But of course, you know that it is inexplicable, it is unacceptable, and extremely unfortunate that his movements were checkmated on that day. And we totally disagree with that.
And well, when we talk about movement, perhaps I'm also trying to put that into the supplementary, or rather the rerun, which held the other day, which was on Sunday. That's your state. And a lot of people have said the majority of people from Anambra State have no business doing any other thing other than go to their places of worship on a Sunday. How true is that?
Well, of course, Anambra has always been a Christian state, but the option lies with the voter. If the voter decides to go to church, all well and good. But I don't think that will impinge on the validity of the election. Of course, no, that is absolutely impossible. If you decide to go to church, I'm aware of the fact that the church as an institution, that they are not traveling out of Nigeria. So if you decide to exercise your right of religious worship on that day, that is absolutely a choice which anybody can take, and it has nothing to do with the validity of the outcome of the elections.
Can we rule out money politics in this particular election? People trying to buy votes, people trying to induce people and sway votes on election day by giving out money?
Well, of course, you know that even before the election, that some political parties have been sharing bags of rice. There have been some candidates who are giving out motorcycles and all that. That is money. So coming in to share money on that day, of course, you know, it's a blemish on the electoral process. But you cannot isolate some of these things from a level of development, because there is absolute hunger and poverty. And these are things that will always impact negatively on the electoral process, because there are certain platforms, there's a certain level you isolate people from some of these Naira-related inducements. But as it is now, the poverty level is at such a level that some of these things will be very attractive. And
well, speaking on the platform of Crusade for Justice, now we're looking at development. Do you think that sometimes the government or those in authorities deliberately causes some of these underdevelopment, just in case a time comes like this, so that when you talk about poverty in the land, if all have actually been put in place for the people, I don't think anyone will be swayed by a motorcycle or some Naira notes to change his vote.
Yes, of course, you know. But you see, the position is that how you have to look at what is there on the ground for you. And I have consistently maintained in several fora that it is radically challenging when you are talking about provision of amenities in Nigeria to do that with the present structure. And I have said that a lot of institutions ought to be collapsed. You cannot talk about developing an entity like Nigeria with the kind of overheads we have. It is mathematically impossible. So what we have are sporadic shows of provisions of dividends of democracy, but it is not enough, because for you to move this nation forward, the attack must be comprehensive, and it must be on all fronts. And what we are seeing here now is just all these isolated and sporadic displays of flashes of readiness to do that. We need a leader who has the political drive to drive through some of these things, and that is why it's difficult to talk about some of these things in isolation. The electoral process in isolation, the university educational system in isolation, because they are all on the same board and they must be moved at the same time.
Richard Nwankwo, many thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Another moment here, I will be back.